You saw in that reading, and I know it was a little bit longer of a read, but you guys are upper class. I mean, come on, you're fine. That there are a lot of let me phrase it this way. It wasn't just like yesterday, everybody sat down and said, how do we solve climate change? This has been going on for a long time. There have been lots and lots and lots of discussions, lots of different types of ways of trying solving that to solve it, to try to figure out what's going to work the best. And as you saw in there, there's a lot of things on the table trying to solve a whole range of different issues. Climate change is not a one cause thing. There's multiple causes to it. There are multiple states involved with multiple reasons for contributing and not contributing, with multiple different costs, risks, and all that. All that's going to combine in a way that's going to require a bunch of different instruments. It's not just going to be one thing, we sign our name, and it's done. Even that the podcast you listened to earlier vastly oversimplifies how much that would, quote unquote, solve the climate change problem. It would definitely be a step in the right direction, but you would not have solved it by any stretch of the imagination. So let's talk about this. We call these types of public goods that again, our example is the stopping the man-made climate change, an aggregate effort, meaning it's going to require, aggregate means essentially sort of from here and from here and from here over time. So it's going to require efforts from a lot of different sources over a long period of time. Those are really hard to do. Again, think about this in terms of like going on a diet. I know I had that analogy earlier on, but going on a diet, like if let's say my goal is to exercise more, that actually is easier than diet. And the reason why is because exercise, I just go do it. And once I do it, I've done it for the day. Now tomorrow I'm gonna have to go do it and I'm done again. With dieting, it's different though, because essentially every single minute I have to not do something. You have to sort of keep that up all the time. It's not just I do it and I'm done for the day. I have to keep doing it every minute or it doesn't work. I can't sort of go on a diet for, 20 hours and then 4 hours I can just pig out all I want. That doesn't work. And that's what we call an aggregate effort. These are way harder to achieve, particularly when we're talking about multiple people, or I guess in this case, multiple states doing this. So what are the difficulties in providing this global public good? Let's break it down, and then we'll talk about sort of, well, we're not going to really try to solve it here. I'm going to ask you guys to think about then what should U.S. foreign policy be to try and adapt to these problems that we have here. Number one is the effects are not seen as very costly. Again, I pointed this out for the United States, particularly from the United States position. Like, you can have all this conversation about it's going to be catastrophic. Nobody knows that for sure. It's definitely going to be catastrophic to some people, but it's probably not going to be catastrophic to the United States, at least in the short term. And some are going to deny there's any effects at all. This is becoming less and less. But even here, you're going to say there's effects, they're just not catastrophic. Until the catastrophe happens, it's really hard to demonstrate that they are going to be catastrophic. Humankind is going to survive the changing temperature. Here's another thing. When we say catastrophic, do we mean that humankind is wiped off the earth like an asteroid hitting? Probably not. It's just going to be a huge adaptation. But humankind will survive. It's costly, but it's not like the costliest. And then there's different effects, costs in different states. This is a really important thing. Some are actually going to benefit from climate change. For example, Russia will probably benefit from climate change. It has tons of land that right now is unusable because of permafrost. If it gets a little bit warmer, it's going to do a little bit better. Different areas inside states are going to benefit from climate change. So it's not going to be a straight across the board, everybody is harmed by this. The poorest states are most likely to be adversely affected, but of course we know that the poorest states have the least amount of voice, and actually they contribute the least to the problem. So, fine. Rich states like the United States can substitute local public goods, like for example, a seawall. If the oceans start rising, well, we want to have our beach houses, so we'll just put a seawall out there. It'll be a little bit ugly, but at least, the floods won't come in later on. If it gets a little bit warmer in Arizona, we'll just get better air conditioning units and we're good. So the effects, even if they are costly, they're not seen as costly. And that's the key thing here, is whether you perceive them to be costly or not. Another difficulty in providing this is that prevention is seen as very costly. So if the effects may not be seen as very costly, particularly by those who are in the best position to solve the problem, the prevention is seen as very costly. In fact, what's going to happen is people will point back to this COVID-19 sort of shutdown of the economy and say, you're that concerned about the environment. You want to do that again? You want to put millions out of work because we can't afford gasoline or things like that? Short-term costs to economic growth, and of course, this continuous intervention idea. It's not just going to be a one-time thing. You have to keep doing it. And that is costly, and that is politically problematic, because take Americans, for example. We want to drive what we want to drive. We want to do the activities we want to do. And if they are problematic for the environment, well, too bad. Another difficulty in providing this is it requires that aggregate effort that I mentioned before. I have a short-term benefit to not contribute, but so does every other state. So what this means is I will contribute a sufficient amount only if, the United States, let me phrase it this way. The United States will gladly participate in all the things you have down for the Madrid. I will contribute a sufficient amount if, I should say this, if I've solved those other two problems. If America sees the effects as costly, and if America sees the steps taken for prevention as not very costly, or if they are costly, they're costly to everyone at the same time. I will contribute a sufficient amount if I am assured everybody else will, in particular for the United States, China will, Europe will, and I believe it benefits me. So this is where U.S. foreign policy is going to sort of step into this whole thing is, if you want the U.S. to do these things, you have to solve these problems. If you want the U.S. to convince other states to get on board too, they have to solve those problems for them as well. So that's really all I have on this. There's definitely more we can talk about on this, but this is sort of where U.S. foreign policy then bumps into it. Is like, okay, then what do you do? How do you approach it differently if you're a liberal internationalist, or if you are a offensive realist or a neoconservative? Like, how do these things sort of approach that? So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you look at sort of the latest summit, the COP25. This was the one that was in Madrid last year, or at the end of last year. And just look at some of the things that they talked about, why it didn't, spoiler alert, why it didn't work. And then to sort of answer some questions from that U.S. foreign policy point of view in an assignment. A very quick assignment, not a long one. And then that's it. I will see you guys next week for our last week. Can you believe we only have 1 week left? So that's it. See you later.